says he's driving, so he will be listening. So what we are covering today, as I'm getting ready for a day of bylaws and platform and recording the cult of RONR, is again a few more Dave Smith clips. And I'm sure Zach will be by to ask me, saying, is that all you cover? No, it's just that's what I'm binge watching right now. And when I find good stuff to talk about, I don't really care, if it's the same person I've been talking about for a while. Be grateful that I'm not on my Ben Shapiro kick right now. Let me just get this moisturizer on. I just slather it on there. When you're old, man, you can't have too much moisturizer. Oh boy. Okay, so it looks like it's irritating my face a little. I see it getting all red. We'll have to let that settle down. All right, let me just wipe that goop off. Let's go to the first clip, shall we? Without any further ado.
So I tweeted the other day, and we'll play the video in a second, but I tweeted something the other day that I wanted to put out there, particularly because I saw so many libertarians, just outraged about the storming of the Capitol. And I just threw it out there and I said, I think an interesting question to ponder if you're on the left or the right, but especially if you're a libertarian, is when do you think it would be justified for angry citizens to storm the Capitol building? Now, I'm not asking you when you think it's strategically a good idea or anything like that. I'm just saying, since you're so outraged about this, is there any situation where it would be justified? What would that be? What would it look like? And I got a lot of interesting responses from it. And then, of course, some, outrage. So I tweeted the other day, and we'll play the video in a second, but I tweeted something the other day.
Hold on one sec. Let's go to the next scene.
I wanted to put out there,
Hold
particularly.
On. Be quiet, Dave. I'm talking now. Okay.
I'm speaking.
Let me get this to me full screen if I can. Okay. So immediately my ears perked up at that because, as I've been doing those videos on the non-aggression principle, or actually more specifically, the drink that soda too fast. The NAP pledge and what that means when it comes to violent insurrection, or whatever you want to call it, was basically just say no. But I had not yet listened to any of these broadcasts from Dave Smith, and it is amazing to me. There is a standard that I use to see if I'm on the right track, because I drive myself crazy thinking. It's like, that's why I don't sleep, because my mind will not go to rest. I'll be thinking of shit like this. So a standard that I tend to take is, if I'm thinking of something and then I go and listen to other people that I respect and find that they're echoing the same thoughts, and even more particularly, let me put it to you this way, not everyone echoing the same thoughts, because then it's obviously right. You don't need any kind of confirmation if everyone is saying it. But if, at least one person that you respect out of the whole den is saying what you just were thinking, I think that's a good confirmation that at least, it doesn't mean you're right, but there's some good basis for what you were thinking. Like, you aren't completely off on La La Land. I tend to say that when you're the first or only person to think of something, you're not the genius you think you are. You're probably way off track. And I used to say that a lot when I was doing my theological work, and I would say theological novelty is not a good thing. And I think you can transpose that into political as well. Political novelty is probably not a good thing. Good ideas tend to come together, it's not just one person. I mean, every once in a while there's that theory of the great man. Chances are you're not the great man, I'm not the great woman. So with all that being said, Dave's going to start to go down a line that I was already thinking, which was very encouraging to me. So even though, put aside now your big L libertarian hat, because I made it clear in my video about the pledge that if you're going to be a pledged member of the Libertarian Party and you're going to be involved in a political solution, you have voluntarily laid aside your right to violently revolt against the government. If that's the path you want to take, don't be part of a political party, and certainly don't be part of the Libertarian Party, because we want no part of that. And if you go off and do something like that, you will find your former political party strongly repudiating you in terms you probably will not like. But that aside, in theory land, where we are not big L libertarians, because this question was asked of me, is it ever justified to storm the Capitol, say? And I think we would be very hard pressed as libertarians to say, no, it's never justified. That's kind of insane, because we do agree that the government is aggressing against us. Now, I personally can say it's never justified for me, but that's because I have a religious view, not a political view, a religious view of pacifism. So for me personally, never justified. But that's me, and it's a religious thing, and I don't impose it upon anybody else. So the larger philosophical question still remains. Now, I think you all should be asking yourself, when might it be justified? Just in theory. I'm not trying to get you to, put a barometer on your wall and go, oh, well, when it reaches that point, I'm off. No, no, no. As I also said to libertarians, it's some of them who seem to be very, very eager for civil war, that, be careful what you wish for. Because if you got civil war, I don't think you'd like it once you got it. It isn't a video game. It isn't all glory. It is terror and blood and death and destruction. And though there might be a bright light at the end of the tunnel, it isn't always that way. And I see Mike Seebeck did not get my message that he was supposed to come late. And I see him ringing my doorbell. Let me give him a call to see if he wants to come in the house and wait. Okay, I'm back. I'm not sure if Mike's coming up or not, but he's invited to. So where were we? Here he comes. I'll have him say hi. I'm not going to be putting makeup on him. Yeah, so it's kind of over. Just so I can. Hi. So we're getting ready for Cultivar ONR, but you might hear some peanut gallery stuff in the background if you want to just sit in, and if you wanted to bring your laptop up too, if you wanted to.
I don't know what to do on there at the moment. So.
Okay. Remember, we need to review the platform too.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So.
We had that meeting tonight.
I'll do this as kind of quickly as I can, but we had so far did a Dave Smith clip. I'm recapping for Mike. You guys just got to be patient. Where he said he was talking about libertarians who was very upset about what happened with the Capitol. Uh-huh. And he asked them, well, would there be any circumstance in which storming the Capitol would be justified? And he said he got some good answers, but he also got some,
Oh, is that what that post was this morning?
Did I post a
Facebook post?
Oh, no. That had to do with, libertarians just a lot. No, that had to do with me bitching about Facebook censoring Trump I didn't mention the state or the government anywhere. And half of the comments are, what a libertarian you are. You want the government. Where did I say anything about the government? Since when do companies get to do what they want mean they get to do what they want without being criticized?
If they can do what they want, why can't they open up with the coronavirus stuff?
Yeah, but, Facebook's not closed from. No, but it was like crazy.
That's a point, though.
I never once mentioned the government. Yeah. And it's like, okay. All right, so let's go to the next clip. I think this is the one I've already done. Let's go here. And next one. If I can get it going.
What a lot of people ended up responding with was it would have to be for this reason or for that reason or something like that. And that might be fair enough. There's something to that point, but then it almost like it leads you down this interesting next thread where you're like, okay, so it's not the act itself that you think is so outrageous. It's that they were doing it in support of Donald Trump. That's what you're outraged by, because that kind of changes the dynamic of how outraged you can be.
And also,
a quarter 15 minutes.
It does, though, doesn't it? Are they just mad because it was Trump? Or are they mad because it was the actual act? And you see I got the comments thing up here too. And every time I do my makeup, I fuck up my contact lens. It's like I'm trying to get it to not go in the behind my eye.
Fun.
Yeah, so it really seems like people like are pretending to have this objective riots are the voice of the unheard type attitude, as if they don't care one way or another about the cause, that it's just, you know, in theory riots are good or could be good or could be used for good. But underlying it, you soon find out, no, it's just the riots I agree with. And what's even stranger with this is I agree with the cause of a lot of the earlier riots before. The police brutality and things like that, I mean, they freaking suck. And I understand what they were upset about. But in that circumstance, I didn't agree with the destruction of property they did, obviously. But then
that never made sense in the first place.
Well, but
why destroy private property when you're bitches with the public police?
Because mobs are mindless, but right, they were destroying private property, which I had a huge problem with, and nobody wanted to talk about that, including the Libertarian Party, by the way. They didn't hardly, and I'm really upset at the Libertarian Party right now. And people are asking me, you know, you're on APRC, did you raise appropriate objections? I'm not allowed to tell you or I'd kill you. Let's just say, have you ever known me to keep my mouth shut? And that should answer your question. But here, the property, quote unquote, that they destroyed is government buildings. I'm sorry, I'm not crying any fucking tears for government buildings. Yet, the National LP tweet, of course they weren't talking about the buildings, they were talking about the people, but and we pray for the safety of all those in Washington. Okay, great. People, that's fine. I'm always all about people. But where were our prayers for the safety of the property owners that were getting their shit destroyed? We didn't say anything like that. And what it looks to the public like, oh, your fellow swamp rats. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're praying for them, but not your average Joe. You know, when the swamp gets attacked, when the seat of power gets attacked, there's panic. But when it's Joe liquor store owner, you know, on Main Street, we're not.
Well, of course, because after all, it's what Joe's liquor store on Main Street is evil capitalism, but the U.S. Capitol is the sacred seat of our beloved government.
But we're talking from libertarians, though.
No, I'm talking from their perspective.
Yeah, well, not libertarian.
No,
perspective.
Our perspective is the opposite.
But what I'm saying is it hasn't been.
Yeah.
I mean, the rank and file might be, but not the voice coming out of the National Party. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, I can only put so much of that on the current term because a lot of the tone of that messaging was set last term by Nick, and we all know where Nick was coming from with that. Well, we don't really know, but we know it was bad. Anyway. Yeah, we don't know how that happened or what happened to him, but yeah. So I don't entirely place that at the feet of this LNC, though we could have did an about face, but this, you know. But anyway, yeah, I in answer to the question, did I object where I could on a secret committee that I'm not allowed to tell you anything about? All you got to do is just think about me and that I don't keep my mouth shut. And you have your answer without me telling you the answer. Okay, next clip.
Right? Like if there was, say, like a tyrannical government and someone wanted to overthrow them, you're saying that is justified if you want to replace them with the correct government, but it's not justified if you don't want to replace the, I'm not saying the argument falls apart, but it certainly gets a little bit weaker than just this is never justified. And of course, if you look at what the government has done to its own people this year, like literally locking people in their houses, taking away their livelihood, bailing out corporations, robbing people while they have no jobs because the government forced them out of work. I mean, it's kind of hard for a libertarian to argue that if they were doing it for the right reasons, it wouldn't be justified, right? So that's kind of the position you're in.
I had a good discussion with someone on Facebook that's going along the same lines that Dave Smith did, where they say, well, but those people are there to have a coup and install Trump as king. And I first said, that's your delusion masquerading as fact. No such thing was trying to happen. But let's pretend so.
Wow, the land of make-believe.
If people have a right to abolish the government and set up a new government that they think might best protect their freedom, there are people who do think a good king is better than a bad democracy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with them, but they have the right to think that. So what? They only have this right to set up new government as might seem best to protect their freedom if you agree with them? That some people might prefer a dictatorship and think that that's better. I don't.
This goes back to the whole discussion of what was going on back in both 1776 and 1787. The whole Declaration of Independence. Jefferson said it specifically, that it is the right to throw off government and institute a new one.
Right. And
in the Constitutional Convention, Hamilton, that schmuck, wanted to make, instead of a president, they wanted a monarch-like figure as the executive and to serve for life. Then he tried to get it for a 6-year term until they settled on a 4-year term in that convention. So there is historical precedent to back up exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but so they're like, well, so it would have been, so basically it is, yeah, all these things are rights, but only if we like how you're exercising the rights. Well, that's not fucking how rights work, dude.
That's how the left thinks it works.
But these are libertarians. I'm not talking about, I don't deal with the left on this.
Well, there's been a lot of co-opting in that direction, unfortunately.
And unless they come in my chat, I'll talk with anybody. Okay, we got a comment here. NPR suggested a libertarian was involved in the Capitol building riot. Well, there was a lady who claimed to be a small L libertarian. I don't know how she was registered to vote if she lived in a partisan state. But that isn't a suggestion. That actually, I believe, is now a proven fact. The word libertarian is quite broad. It doesn't just mean LP member. So I'm surprised there's just one.
Or it could also be a typical NPR leftist attempt to smear the LP at any opportunity they can.
Now, they have clips from this lady. This lady did identify as a libertarian. Yeah. I just don't know to what extent. But
they'll still use it to paint with a broad brush.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course they're gonna bring that up. But there's quite a bit of information on this lady, but I hadn't read yet whether she was a registered libertarian or whatever. If she was see, here's the whole other thing, though. I think it's obvious when you watch the storming the Capitol with Mr. Viking hat. These aren't insurrectionists. They were an internet mob that went there. I don't think they had any intention of going into the Capitol. I think one or two people started going in, and the rest of them were like, oh, we're going in. I like dealing with things more in the abstract, though. I think it was pretty apparent they weren't there to throw over the country.
Of course not.
When they got in the building, what they do? They took fucking selfies.
I mean, the highlight of the whole thing was that somebody stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop.
Yeah, it's...
The question is, did they image the drive first? Hopefully they did and sent the whole information to Assange and Snowden.
All right, so next clip. Let's see. Oh, do it from here.
And now, okay, again, you can still say it's strategically a bad idea. That's a completely separate conversation. And I'm not advocating, anything like this. It's an interesting philosophical question to me.
Okay, it's an interesting philosophical question to me, too. But yeah, he's basically saying it'd probably be pretty stupid. And I agree. Even if you can find a justification, I mean, unless you really are on a suicide mission, I wouldn't do it. And these people who they were LARPers, they weren't insurrectionists. And they're going to pay dearly because the government is going to make an example out of them. But when you see a picture of the quote unquote insurrectionists, and my first comment is this the new iteration of the Village People? I think, That's yeah.
It's fun to stay at the U.S. Capitol.
It's just.
Sorry, it's too easy.
But that's the first thing I thought. I'm like, what? These aren't insurrectionists. But no, it's not a good idea. Let's see what we got here next.
And so the other, once you start like kind of like, you know, pulling the threads out of all of this, what you realize is that from the Trump supporters' perspective, if what they're being told was true, and I'm not saying it is, I'm really not convinced one way or the other about election integrity or fraud in the election. And if I was, you guys know me, I'd fucking tell you. But they're basically being told, and you know, from talking and seeing some of the interviews with a lot of the Trump supporters who were down there, it wasn't just about Donald Trump. I mean, they were upset about lockdowns. They were upset, you know, they feel like the government is fucking over the people, you know, and is no longer accountable to the people and all of this. But they also very much believe that this election was stolen from Donald Trump. Now, if that were true, would it be justified to storm the Capitol building?
Okay, that is the question I wanted to get to. And that is what, and I broke a nail. Yeah, it sucks. I'm going to have to glue that on or something.
World's tiniest violin.
Yeah, my God. I could probably glue it on for our show. I don't want to have a no nail for the show, but let's just put that aside for a second there. At least it didn't bleed. The point he brought up was what I was trying to bring up to libertarians, where they were like, well, this was unjustified type thing. I said, because we're not going to argue about fraud. Mike and I disagree about fraud, but because it's beside the point. Because they were like, what they went there for wasn't true. I go, it's irrelevant. Did they believe it was true? And if they believed it was true, is that a legitimate reason to storm the Capitol? And he's going to come to this conclusion, unless I missed it when I was looking for my eyeshadow. Yes, I think it is. If you think that democracy was so broken that your vote no longer mattered, that elections got stolen, what almost bigger reason could there be?
I don't see a bigger reason. That's one of the very cores of our republic.
Right. It's like people are judging this outside of the beliefs of these people. I'm not getting into whether they were good faith beliefs or not yet. Were they sincere beliefs? I believe they were. And so when you hear these hysterical commentary, including coming from the National Party, that they were attacking democracy. Well, I don't literally do it violently, but I attack democracy every single fucking day with my words. But really, just put in their shoes and let's do the alternate reality. Let's say it was all true. You could say that what they thought they were doing was saving democracy. And when you evaluate other people's motives, you have to be fair. You have to evaluate them from their point of view. Mm-hmm. Now, we could get into whether or not it was reasonable for them to believe that. You obviously would think it is because you think it's reasonable, and I think you're a reasonable person. We disagree, but I know a lot of my friends that I consider reasonable people are convinced that there was election fraud. I'm not, but I can't write off everyone who believes it as irrational, flat earthers.
Well, whether or not you believe there was fraud, and you're right, I do believe there was. I believe I saw it firsthand in terms of how the returns came in, but that's not the point.
Right. We're talking more theory.
Right.
Yeah.
There were people up there who believed that and had
sincerely, right.
But there were also people up there who were not necessarily there because of the concern about election fraud, but because they were there to support Donald Trump. And that's fine too. But the problem that's happened is that you're seeing the media frame all of it as being supporting Trump. They're discounting the possibility of election fraud the way that they have done it from all the way since November 4th. And as a result, they're creating a false narrative loaded with what I would call crapaganda because they're not objectively addressing the situation. And the reality of it is, out of all that mob, and there was only about a handful who were actually breaking a window or two or storming the way. Everyone else was standing there literally just milling around. The reality of it is this: if you're going to storm the Capitol to have a coup, and the left doesn't know what that term means either,
I think you'd leave your little horns at home. But
you would not try to stand out like that. B,
Yeah.
you would come much better armed than that.
Yet none of them drew guns.
Right, except the Capitol Police guy who shot
Well.
and killed that one lady.
Yeah.
And the third thing of it is, you would be a lot more organized to deal with and plan it out for contingencies to deal with these things. You would have scouted, you would have reconned your area and prepared yourself for an actual literal battle, not just a freaking flash crowd pissed off at the Electoral College for proceedings.
Well,
So-
and when you got in, the first thing you did wouldn't be to take a selfie
Yes,
and post it on social media.
right,
That's kind of stupid.
exactly. So if this was an attempted coup, and I doubt it was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen.
And I don't even think it was a spontaneous coup where you could write off the planning issue going, well, they didn't plan on it, but when they got there, they worked themselves up into a frenzy and then decided. I don't think there's any evidence of that.
And if that was the case, they wouldn't have stopped when the doors were to the House chamber were barricaded. They would have broken it down.
Well,
kept
and they
on
wouldn't
going.
have taken a selfie either. But
Exactly.
I mean,
it's
all the evidence points to it being somewhat not the most intelligent internet crowd. And
Right.
come on.
And the other thing that gets me about is everybody on the left is yelling, screaming, "This is sedition! We need to lock them up and execute them for that." And it's like, okay, guys, why don't you go talk to John Adams about that?
Yeah, it's really downplaying sedition.
Well, it's not. They don't even know what it means.
I know, but they did end up where they knew they weren't supposed to be. Whatever laws they broke, okay. It is someone else's property. No matter how I feel about government property, fine. I'm not justifying what they did. It's just not the huge thing that it's being made out to be.
Yeah.
But it has the potential to turn into something very, very huge and ugly. And I get that.
They're now talking about building a solid concrete 7-foot wall around the entire Capitol.
And they're going to keep all the politicians in there, quarantine them from the rest of us? Good.
Well, my immediate thought was, okay, fine, have one way in and out, and then when everybody's in there for a joint session, somebody walk up and change the padlocks.
Yeah.
And then everything will be better again.
Now, we'll say you had said some of them were there just to support Trump.
Some were.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
If any of them, I don't know if we have any breakout as to the ones that were there who legitimately believed the fraud or whatever, and the ones who were just right. The ones who were just there to support Trump, there was no justification for getting out of hand. It's the people. The issue I'm talking about is if they did, quote unquote, storm the Capitol, what is a potential justification? Just liking Orange Man is not enough. But believing that democracy was stolen is a legitimate reason. And
yet the other thing is this, and I've seen accounts from this from people who were there online. There were people who went to Trump's speaking thing over down at the Ellipse before they went to the
in Wayne's home too.
Yeah, before they went over to the Capitol. And when they got to the Capitol, things were already happening. Which means either they had people who were, and I'll say the word, agents provocateur already starting stuff, or word traveled way fast. I think, to be honest, my own opinion, I think what started this whole mess to get out of hand was Mike Pence. Because that's what caused everybody to go, what the blankety blank is happening here? And that's what really, I think, riled things up, because he was seen as a means to put the kibosh on all this stuff that they felt was the fraud. And he literally,
we're live streaming Wayne, just letting you know.
To them, he literally wussed out on them. And having read the letter that he put out, he put his own political career ahead of that of the country, and in doing so, he may have killed both.
Well,
time will tell.
Yeah, you and I have different opinions on that. I actually believe Pence did the right thing, but
time will tell.
That's okay. So there is a potential justification if, in fact, that was true. But we all know they weren't there for a freaking insurrection. Yeah. It's just that's not how you. And listen, if that was an insurrection, And all it takes is some dude with Viking horns and a couple Trump flags for us to be successfully insurrected against.
Then Barney Fife is the greatest
Yeah.
deputy sheriff in
We've
history.
got bigger problems than, the village people storming the Capitol. Silly, silly, silly. So, and over panicking doesn't, over panicking just encourages more. You know, I think the best thing to have done with these people, because it was silly, was to laugh at just how stupid it was. But I think he has some.
Let's make him sign a guest book.
So I'm gonna go. I think we have more on this, but I'm not sure, and I'm trying to decide what other color I want to do. I think purple.
If the Democratic election had just been stolen, like Donald Trump really won, but because from the highest levels of government all the way down to the most local levels of government, there was a conspiracy to steal it and give it to Joe Biden. If that were true, then would it be justified to storm the Capitol building? And I got to say, I think you can certainly disagree with the premise, but if you grant the premise, I think you have a very tough time arguing that it's not justified.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we were saying. And that's what I would like to hear libertarians actually address. Again, not from an LP perspective.
That's a pretty impartial evaluation right there.
Yeah.
It's right on the money.
It is. And I thought he did a really good job with it. And again, I have to say over and over again, not speaking as an LP member because, of course, we have the pledge and all that. But I can't find like the brush I want. I'm sitting here going, look at all these brushes, and I'm thinking I need more. Oh, this one might work. No, that's no good. It's too limp. That's what she said. Yeah. So, yeah, I want to hear libertarians address the issue that if an election was stolen, you don't need to agree this one was, if, in fact, in theoretical land, an election was stolen.
And if is a big word, folks.
Right.
It's the biggest, smallest word in the English language.
Right. We're mining the subjunctive here. Would it be justified to do the equivalent? I'm using storm the Capitol as a fill-in for any number of things that would be kind of equivalent. And I would love to hear a libertarian argument that it wouldn't. Not that it would be stupid. I think it would be stupid.
Well, let me extend that question. Let's go back a couple hundred years. It was the British attempting to confiscate the munitions of the towns at the arsenals at Lexington and Concord, justification to shoot the bastards. They thought so.
Yeah, it's hard to know. You know, the funny thing, though, when you go back into history, things like that, I'm always a little bit reluctant because in some sense, history is written by the victors. So I don't always trust everything that's in the account. But that's why I prefer dealing in ifs.
Yeah.
Because you can make a pure theoretical situation and not be worried that there's some fact you didn't.
But the point
know.
I was getting at was, at what point is it justified versus what it isn't? And that's the real question.
And it's not always easy.
No, it's not.
But if we all grant that in theory, you know, moving outside of pacifists and things like that, that there is a point at which it is, I do think you have to ask yourself what that point is. And if a legitimate belief that the election was stolen isn't, then really where is your warm fuzzies and all this loyalty you're claiming to democracy? Because without fair elections, there's no democracy.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not because they want to